Welcome all to the Node, your place for news, interviews, and education for crypto, DeFi, and TradFi. And I'm sure David will join us here in a minute. But until then, I will start with introducing our socials. So, first out the gate, we have our YouTube channel. So, if you are interested in joining us live and joining the chat where you can ask questions and make comments, you can tell us how we're wrong about projects and information we're putting out, or if you want to ask us questions. We're more than happy to engage with the chat here. It's actually something that we enjoy doing, and we also encourage people to correct us. If you can, tell us that we're wrong about some information that we're putting out, and tell us, where that information is, so that we can confirm it, then we will definitely change our narrative. So this is the place that you do it, is at YouTube, and you can find us at the Node Network, all one word. And you can see here we are truly a network. So just today, we have 4 live shows. So you're watching the Node right now. And later today at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, David will be going live with Ellie. And he will be doing about 15 to 20 minutes of technical analysis at market close for crypto and TradFi. And then we'll move into a live coaching session with Ellie. There's David. And after that, we will be going live, myself and Jeff, at 5 p.m. Pacific. And that would be 8 p.m. Eastern. And that will be Crypto and Chill, where usually I just kind of sip on some wine, smoke it if you got it. And we just kind of unwrap, what's gone on the past couple of days. That's on Tuesdays and Fridays. So we just kind of unwrap, what's gone on since the last episode, and just kind of relax and just, shoot the shit. And then tonight is a special episode with Jay and Ellie, who are Jay's in the chat. They are going to do a live stream tonight, and I might join them. Arc Raiders just launched a new map today called Riven Tides. And so they're going to be going live with that. And we're going to see how often we can get killed. So with that, we are truly a network. So again, we have the Node. That's Monday through Friday. We have Crypto and Chill Tuesdays and Fridays. The Blockchain Report, that's immediately after this show, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Sovereign Soil on Saturdays. That's where I talk about emergency preparedness and homesteading, both of which I've been doing for decades now. The Market Wrap that I talked about with the live coaching. We have music for those interested. Jeff is a DJ, and he does interviews with other DJs in the Bay Area, and also does tutorials and spins music every Saturday night. The Red Pill on Thursdays. That is our kind of our hot topic controversial show, where we talk about politics, religion, relationships, anything that is considered a taboo topic that you're not supposed to talk about. We have heated discussions. We have a panel of usually 4 to 6 people, and we unwrap it. Sometimes we have differing opinions, and it gets heated. But the purpose of the show is to show that adults can get together, debate topics, have differing opinions, and still be friends. So that's the whole point of that show. And then, of course, Gaming and Chill that I mentioned. Next out the gate, we got the Node Network X channel. So it is at the Node _network. The all one word was not available. And that is where you can keep up on me trying to debate different people about different projects. Here, we are not maxis on anything. It doesn't matter how bullish we are. Bitcoin, Canton Network, Aerodrome, we will point out the positive and the negative aspects of every project. We are not paid. We are not incentivized in any way when we do interviews, when we talk about projects. We never have and never will accept money for that. We want to make sure that we are objective and that we point out all aspects, so that we are educators here. We are not influencers. We are not here to influence you to do anything. We are here to educate you so that you can make your own choices on what you want to invest in. What are your thoughts on that, David?
Education.
It's all
You
about
gotta
clearing.
get educated.
Yeah.
You gotta go to the Leering Center. Gotta
Yes.
get educated for the strategery.
Yes. And if you want to access some questions, please, by all means, ask.
Mhm.
All right. And then last, but definitely not least, is the node.pro. So this is our official website, and this is truly the node of the node. This is where everything comes together. You can find our live streams here, here in the live stream tab. Let's get rid of that. You can find, if you want to come here, you can find your starting point. If you're looking to start your education into crypto and DeFi, it doesn't matter if you've been doing this for years or if you're just starting. We have entry level, you know, 100 level courses where it explains what blockchain is. It explains what a wallet is. It explains, the U.S. dollar, fiat, the traditional banking system. We educate you on all of it so that you understand why this technology is so powerful and why these institutions, banks, and governments are adopting it. Because people can call crypto a scam all they want, the technology behind it. And yes, there are scams in crypto, but the technology behind it is sound. It is being adopted, it is being built on. And if you are not educated on it, you are going to get left behind in some ways, from an investment standpoint. If you're just a user of this technology, most of you out there won't even realize you're using it. You're going to go to your usual banking app. One day you're going to log on and you're going to start seeing some crazy buttons where they're like, lend your Bitcoin or, take out a loan against your Bitcoin or Ethereum. And you're going to be like, what the hell? So you need to educate yourself on this stuff because banks and institutions, JP Morgan, and I'm not talking about small banks. I'm talking about JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, BNY Mellon, the New York Stock Exchange, the US government. This isn't a fad. They said that the internet was a fad. Look at the internet now. So don't listen to the narratives. Educate yourself. And you can do that with DeFi University. 100% no cost. We do not charge for it. Please use it as much as you want. There's no catches, there's no gimmicks. Just sign up and learn. And you can join our Discord for no cost as well. If you have any questions, feel free to come in there. I'm monitoring that all the time, unless I'm sleeping. And so come in there. We have a great community of people that will answer your questions. David does a paid coaching program. If you want to accelerate your learning and you want that one on one mentorship on private live calls, maybe you're a high net worth individual that you don't want to put your information out there. You don't want to be in public chats talking about your portfolio. All you got to do is talk to David. He does a no charge initial consultation and you can get a feel for it. It's the same coaching he's doing with Ellie later on today, if you're interested. We also have, if you come to the community tab, again, you can join the school, you can join the Discord. And he has live calls if you want to dip your toe in the water and see what the community's like and talk to other people that have learned from David. $99 a month, you can join his daily live calls and where it's an open forum. He teaches, and then everyone in the community that's in there has open discussions about what they're doing in DeFi, how they're earning, and ask questions live. And we already talked about the coaching. This is the coaching page. Feel free to go through that. And then the newsletter that we're about to launch for 66 cents a day. You can save the children. No, I'm kidding. You can for $20 a month. We have a AI generated newsletter, and that might sound sketchy at first, but bear with me. And you can get a no charge free or sample. I can't say the F word. But you choose the assets that you are interested in. And I'm talking crypto, I'm talking TradFi stocks and commodities. You pick the tickers. It will, you can click generate, go make your cup of coffee, cup of tea, come back, a couple minutes later, and it's ready for you. And it will get sent to your email and you can view it, on your screen. And it gives you the trading ranges, it gives you the liquidity pool ranges, it gives you the trending news, It gives you social media posts, all this with hyperlinks. It gives you our analysis on, the nodes analysis for what is it, 15 days, 30 days, and 90 days?
Well, I mean, so I've been able to get it to work. It's been generating. There's quite a few things that need to come together to make an AI newsletter like this work. And
Yes.
on the newsletter on the page here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build like a mock-up version of it so that people will, be able to go to the page and see how it's generated. Um, but yeah, no, it's real-time data. It's real-time data, so it's legit.
No, no, and that's why we're not rushing it. Is we want this to be a good, solid, quality product. We're not just going to throw out a gimmicky AI newsletter. We're going to make sure that it's giving good, solid data before it launches. So we apologize it's taking so long, but quality takes time. We're not going to rush it. And I'm sorry, I wasn't laughing at you. I was laughing at Wiz.
No, 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 and also, just think about this too. The newsletter is just one piece of the Node network. We've got
Oh,
all the merch in the store. We've got the community, those calls. We've got all of the courses. We've got all of the programming. The website itself. All of the agents that actually do most of the work for us. And then this music agent that I'm working on here. That thing is almost ready to rock and roll. So I'm going to test that out on the DeFi University channel first to make sure it works, and then I'm going to port it over to the Node network. And I mean, yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. That's why I write stuff down. I write stuff
no,
down
no,
in a notebook.
yeah, no, it's smart to do, and I have to thank you for the AI that generates the shorts now, because that frees up so much time for me that now I'm able to do stuff like this. So now I'm able to go through and do all the titles, descriptions, thumbnails for all the shows for the whole day.
That's
So
cool.
so now it's just when Jay and Ellie jump on, for the gaming, they can just click into the studio that's already pre-built. It has all the descriptions with the hashtags, all that stuff. Everything's optimized. Good looking thumbnails. So yeah, we're coming together nicely. So enough of all that. But Wispy, yeah, dude, friggin' that was hilarious. Illy and Omar, where she was like, back in World War 11, because it had II, and so instead of World War II, she called it World War 11. I was freaking losing it when I saw that. That was freaking hilarious.
Bro, she's literally a Somalian pirate scammer, and she's
Well,
in
dude,
Congress. It's like,
and,
what?
it's obvious listening to her speak that like she is a very low intelligence.
She's very low IQ.
Yes, she needs to
She
go to her.
literally is.
Well, she needs to go to her own district and go to the Leering centers.
I don't think she graduated, man. She didn't graduate from the Leering Center. Yeah.
No, no.
No,
All
she
right.
just paid for it.
All right. So enough clowning for a minute. Let's jump into some news. Let's jump into some news. So first up, we got the sovereign arms race, the U.S. government stablecoin reserve, and actually Bitcoin is I think the more important one. Let me read this a little bit. Let's see.
So is it a stablecoin reserve, or are you talking about the Bitcoin reserve? Because I saw
Well,
that.
it's the Bitcoin reserve, but there's a little bit of news on stablecoin. So they've issued a proposed rule. So the U.S. Treasury, FinCEN, and OFAC have issued a proposed rule that treats stablecoin issuers as full-fledged financial institutions under the Bank Secrecy Act. We are officially witnessing the dollarization of the internet, where the US government doesn't just regulate stablecoins, it incorporates them into national economic security.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
I mean,
Let me
look,
pull up.
if we're trying to, basically inflate away that $40 trillion debt, then this makes a lot of sense to do. Um, So it looks like there's, the Bitcoin strategic reserve, and then there's also a stable coin reserve, it looks like here. So it might not be part
Yeah.
of that digital asset stockpile. But that FinCEN OFAC proposed rule that you're talking about, Mike, it looks like that was from April 8th, potentially, or maybe it was from today. I'm not quite sure. It could be a
No,
hallucination.
it's up on the screen. It's up on the screen, April 8th. So
Got
it says that the U.S. Department of Treasury Financial Crimes Enforcement, FinCEN, and the Office of Foreign Assets Control issued a joint proposed rule to implement provisions of the Guiding and Establishing National Innovation for U.S. Stablecoins Act. The proposed rule, which implements the Genius Act's anti-money laundering AML, is probably what you hear most when it's referred to, and sanctions compliance program requirements encourages innovation in payment stablecoins while providing an appropriately tailored regime to mitigate potential illicit finance risks. The proposed
Nah,
rule,
sure it
right,
does.
right, the proposed rule would subject permitted payment stablecoin issuers um, to requirements applicable to financial institutions relate, relating to prevention of money laundering and impose obligations specified in the Genius Act, consistent with FinCEN's efforts to modernize Bank Secrecy Act requirements. The proposed obligations are designed to be fit for purpose, assist law enforcement, and minimize unnecessary burden. The proposed rule would require PPSIs to adopt and maintain an effective sanctions compliance program as required by the Genius Act. So this is again just another example of how these tokenized assets, tokenized fiat in this case, is basically what stablecoins are when they're backed one to one, with U.S. dollars or U.S. dollar equivalent. They are being integrated, at all levels into the traditional finance system. So, what are your
So,
thoughts on
Mike,
this?
how is this different than a CBDC exactly?
Honestly, I don't think it is. I think it basically is a CBDC.
It looks like they just turned stables into CBDCs. So the sanctions compliance part, issuers must maintain the technical capability to block, freeze, or reject transactions that
Yep.
violate US sanctions.
Yep.
This effectively mandates a kill switch or a blacklist capability within the stablecoin's smart contract.
Well, and
So
we just recently saw that a lot of this decentralized blockchains that we thought were decentralized to where they couldn't be frozen, they couldn't be manipulated like that with this exploit with Aave and all these different chains and all these different protocols, and you're seeing all this ETH getting frozen and wallets getting frozen, and it's not as decentralized as we might have thought. Bitcoin for the most part so far, and even that, there's a proposal right now. I think it's like a BIP or something like that, where somebody's trying to basically seize and redistribute Satoshi's wallet or something like that.
I mean, that's you see what Wispy says. Cardano is the answer.
Cardano, Cardano, I think is the answer.
Oh no,
I think Wispy's onto something.
no. I'd rather just hit myself in the head with a hammer than buy Cardano, man.
Well, if you hit
I
yourself
mean,
in the hammer enough, you might believe that Cardano's the answer.
maybe
and,
that's the key.
and you can speak on World War 11.
Ah. I mean, but take a look at this, Mike. So there's this primary versus secondary divide with these PPSIs. So, okay, check this out. The primary market, this is the issuance and redemption. So there, full compliance is required, including, wait for it, customer due diligence and suspicious activity reports or SARS. So, dude, like the US, I love it when they're on stage and they're talking about we want to foster innovation in the United States by regulating away innovation in the United States. Like, this is just, it's hilarious to me, man. Because if they're proposing that for any transfer in the primary market, that you need to file a SAR if it's, I'm assuming, over a certain amount, dude, like, people aren't going to like that one bit. Now, the secondary market, this is wallet to wallet. So they recognize the difficulty of tracking every private transfer. It's like, dude, the whole point is that we don't have to be just beaten over the head with these regulations, but they seem to be just, moving in that direction anyway. It says here, they're recognizing the difficulty of tracking every single private transfer. And it also says that these PPSIs aren't necessarily required to file SARs for secondary transactions where they only interact via a smart contract. So it sounds like the US government is trying to mandate that these stablecoin issuers file SARs if you send stables from your wallet to another wallet exceeding a certain arbitrary amount. What in the world does that mean? Yeah, I see what you said, Jay. I'll pass too. What the hell is that nonsense, man? Like, this is all they're going to do with this type of regulation is they're going to push innovation out of the United States. And when I see, Cynthia Loomis up there waving her arms around, talking about we're going to get this thing marked up by May, and we're going to get this passed, referring to the Clarity Act, it just makes me think, well, maybe passage of the Clarity Act could be viewed as a net negative for crypto innovation in the USA, because it's
That's a
basically
very real possibility.
it's creating this massive moat, where you need a ton of money just to be able to compete in this space. So,
Scotty D. I'll just make a stable name, not a stable. There you go. Workaround.
I think the thing with it is, these stable coins, it can't be US dollar denominated. So whatever it is that you're working on, it has to be denominated in satoshis. That's the only way to escape this onerous regulation.
I wonder. I wonder if it even work. I'm totally. I mean, this just popped in my head, so I could be totally up in the night. But a Bitcoin-backed stable coin, could that
I
be a
mean,
thing? To
a
where
hundred percent.
it's like there's a Bitcoin reserve that backs the amount of stables. But I guess if Bitcoin's fluctuating, it really couldn't back it. Never mind.
I think it could. It definitely could. It could be used as the treasury asset. You could essentially mint, tokens. These would be taproot assets. You could essentially mint these taproot assets against your spot Bitcoin, your spot BTC. And so you could, peg it to whatever arbitrary figure you want. It doesn't have to be pegged to one. You could peg it to whatever. And I think that is the way forward, because if we're talking about freedom money, and then you see, the US government stepping in with all of this regulation and forcing compliance, and all of these large institutions like Tether and Circle rushing to be able to comply with these regulations so that they can gain access and keep access to the US market. These USDC and USDT products are quickly, I think, going to become something that maybe you don't want to hold if you're, yeah.
Real quick, David, but before I forget, hey, chat, start throwing up. Yeah, not actually throw up, but start throwing up in the chat what you want David to do a deep dive on, unless you got something in mind, David.
I do. So what I really want to talk about first is I want to talk about expected value. That's what I want to talk about first today. But if anyone in the chat has something that they want us to take a look at, I'd love to run some new research. Hyperlend. I think we went over Hyperlend yesterday.
So if you have a project or yeah, we did Hyperlend yesterday. So if you want to check that out, Wispy, if you want to check out that episode, it's up on YouTube. But if there's anything else, protocol, chain, whatever, throw it up in the chat. Arc block. All right. Jay was the first one. So if you want to, Bitcoin
Gotcha.
for daily use. Are we out of sync or?
No. I think that maybe the video that I'm seeing from you is kind of like cutting in and out a little bit, but it's okay now.
Okay.
So
Okay, all right.
yeah.
So next, So next we got traditional finance pivot. Oh no, sorry. Jack Dorsey's $2 billion bet. The digital gold narrative is evolving in real time. Block Inc., formerly Square, led by Jack Dorsey, is no longer just adding to its $1 billion plus BTC treasury. We are discussing Block's radical commitment to turning Bitcoin into a daily payment protocol. Dorsey isn't just holding, he is building the infrastructure through Cash App and new mining initiatives, where analyzing his latest moves, raising Cash App withdrawal limits, enabling Square settlers to accept Bitcoin payments, and launching the BitKey self-custody wallet. So it looks like that. What do you see on that? Because I know that that's right up your alley. Because you've been saying this for a while. That's been your narrative for quite some time. Is Bitcoin and Satoshis, basically being should be, and I agree, the new form of money. Because I mean, at least there's a finite supply. Nobody really controls it, so it's a more stable. And instead of being inflationary, it's somewhat deflationary.
Right, but the important thing for me when it comes to BTC and Satoshis is that you can't censor a private key. That's the important thing. But if we're taking a look at what Jack Dorsey is doing, he's essentially built like a layer three. That's basically what he's built. So remember, he's responsible for funding Lightning, the development of the Lightning Network. And with Square, and I think it's Cash App too, right? He's essentially built like a layer three on top of Lightning and the Bitcoin mainnet. So if the Bitcoin mainnet is the layer one, Lightning is the layer two, then anything built on top of Lightning would be, basically like a layer three. So you've got to think about custody. That's the thing that you've got to think about with this. So if you've got, Satoshis on Cash App or on Square, do you actually custody anything? I think the answer is no. So you just got to, consider that when you're taking a look at holding your assets on Mr. Dorsey's platforms, and also remember how he acted when he ran Twitter. Okay,
Yes.
so
Well, in his no, I don't want to say in his defense, but a lot of that stuff that was done, wasn't it the that lady that worked for him, like that was doing a lot of that draconian stuff, where she was censoring and deplatforming and all that. And he didn't, come to the rescue or anything like that. So I see your point, but I just want to make sure that we're clear about, because I know that he was getting threatened by the U.S. government if they did, because of who was in office. No,
so
I get that. I'm just
yeah.
saying I want to make sure that we paint the whole picture. It wasn't just like he was maliciously on his own attacking
Uh-oh, Mike. I think
there's
I
more to
can't,
the story. I
Mike.
just
I
want to make sure
think
we paint the whole
I
picture.
think that you're. It could be me. I'm not quite sure, but I see your video cutting in and out, the audio cutting in and out a little bit. But when it comes to Mr. Dorsey, look, at the end of the day, the buck stopped with him when he was running Twitter. And so, I think that
There we go. I'm
his,
back.
yeah, so I think that,
So, basically, really quick, basically, what I was saying before internet cut me off was I just want to paint the whole picture. It wasn't just like he was, woke up one morning. It was like, I'm going to deplatform people and I'm going to censor everybody. Yes, he didn't step up and do what Elon Musk did, and basically flipped off the government and everybody else and said, no, I believe in free speech. That's what he should have done. Yes, but again, he was getting pressure from the government. He had that lady that was working for him that was doing a lot of that stuff. I just want to make sure that we paint the whole picture, that it wasn't just him doing this. Yeah, he didn't have any nuts and he didn't step up for the First Amendment, but there was more to the story. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know. I think he punted. I think that,
Oh no,
I
he
mean,
did.
look,
Absolutely.
he's if he's the CEO of Twitter, and he's got, his number two going out there and deplatforming and censoring. Um,
Absolutely.
that doesn't exactly make me feel good
No,
about his
no.
Cash App or Square products.
Absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
not debating that. I'm just saying I want to make sure that we paint the whole picture. Here at the node, we point out, all the facts and you make your own decisions. That's all I'm trying to do.
So
And I agree with Jay. I agree with Jay and you. That means he'll just do it again though.
yeah, no, I agree too. And so you've just got to think about like who has custody of those assets. Like if you're holding Bitcoin or Satoshis on Cash App or Square, are you custodying anything? The answer is no. So
Well,
remember,
and
not
he
your
is.
keys, not your crypto.
Welcome, Jim Agove. First time I've seen your name, so welcome. But yes, he is one of the. I don't know if he's the keynote speaker, but he's one of the speakers at Bitcoin 2026. And I'm seeing some reports that there's some record low attendance at the Bitcoin conference. Jay, he tagged me in a couple of posts where like empty rooms when where there's some notable people on stage. So that's kind of interesting to see.
Well, I mean, Mike, it is a Bitcoin bear market. And, so the thing for me is I was taking a look at some of the content of the Bitcoin conference, some of the content that they've been putting out on social media. And it's just like, it's underwhelming. Like, we're not getting the type of announcements out of the Bitcoin conference that would make number go up. Instead, it's stuff like Cynthia Loomis going on stage saying, we're going to get this Clarity Act marked up. And I just think to myself, like, why does Bitcoin need a Clarity Act exactly? Like, why does is
Bitcoin doesn't.
no, it doesn't. It
No,
doesn't at
it's,
all.
and that's why I'm bullish on like Amboss that we're interviewing later this week on Thursday. And they have a, a big announcement is what he told us and why we waited so long to do the interview. He wanted to wait till after the Bitcoin conference so that we could talk about it. So make sure you tune in for that.
Yeah,
But
I know. You see, Mike.
I am
You see
very
what
bullish, and I am shifting. Let
Mike.
me see if I can like
Yeah,
refresh. You can go ahead and take over for a
you're
second. I'm trying to refresh my.
the Starlink's bad. Okay, so I'm going to take over for now. The thing for me, you guys, when I'm taking a look at what Jack Dorsey is doing, he is definitely very influential in the Bitcoin space. And if he's talking about a $2 billion bet with Block's total Bitcoin holdings reaching 28,000 Bitcoin, the thing for me is Block Block. I think it used to be called Square, but
It
Block
did.
with 28,000 Bitcoin, that's an underwhelming number to me. Look, $2 billion is $2 billion, but he's been at this for a long time. I would have thought that he would have had more Bitcoin by now. Um, so, I mean, look, what he is doing though is this zero setup acceptance so that people can easily onboard into, going from dollars to BTC or Satoshis back and forth. That's like a fiat bridge. And he's talking about zero fees through 2026. So, I mean, it's good. It's good that people are going to start to potentially use Satoshis for payments. However, what I think Bitcoin really needs is not adoption through a layer three, but Bitcoin needs adoption on the mainnet. That's what I think Bitcoin needs because Bitcoin needs transaction volume. And Mike, we've run quite a bit of research over the last couple of months on Bitcoin, the layer one, the layer twos. There's more than just Lightning now. And, we could run some research on the layer threes. But the research that we've run about the layer one, the Bitcoin mainnet, the thing that's concerning to me is what happens after the next two halving cycles over the next 6 years. Because once we fall off of that, Bitcoin halving cycle cliff 6 years from now, and the rewards go from, three and an eighth Bitcoin to less than one Bitcoin over the next six years, then miners are going to be essentially supported by transaction volume. And so if people believe that Bitcoin is digital gold and they hold it and don't use it for
That's
transactions,
going to kill it.
then that might not work. That might not work. So just something to keep in mind.
Well, and that's why again, I'm so bullish on these projects like Amboss and things like that are trying to build on Bitcoin, either layer twos or mainnet, because like you said, it's just as those incentives, because the cost isn't going down, to mine Bitcoin. In fact, it's going to keep going up because of the amount of compute power that it takes to mine. So either the price of Bitcoin needs to go up, very sharply to, counter that, or there needs to be transactional volume to where they can earn fees, processing those payments and things like that. So
Or a
I,
combination of both, yeah.
yeah, or a combination of both.
Yeah, you
All
see
right.
what Gemagov is saying? Repurpose Satoshi's legacy quantum vulnerable coins into the mining pool. Um, I mean, on its face, it doesn't sound like a bad idea. It doesn't sound like a bad idea,
But
but
doesn't that put the whole ethos of Bitcoin on its ear?
yeah, I'm not quite sure. You know, I could see how
Well, I
that
mean,
could be a good
you're,
thing.
well, I mean, I understand where it's coming from, but just the fact that they're able to take Satoshi's, freaking Bitcoin, it doesn't that kind of put the whole, ethos of Bitcoin where it or frozen or the freedom money, isn't that the whole reason to buy Bitcoin? And if they can just reach back
Yeah.
into legacy wallets like this
Yeah.
and seize it or freeze it, then is it decentralized?
Well, it's definitely decentralized, but with the wrong Bitcoin improvement protocol, if Satoshi's coins could be, repurposed for some reason, yeah, you see, I could see a way that that could be a good thing, but it would probably be much, much too easy to paint it in the wrong light, to frame it in the wrong way. So, yeah, I don't know. We would need to do more research on a proposal like that before I could really say one way or the other. But on its face, I could see it being a good thing. I could also see it being a bad thing. It depends on what it's used for.
All right. Well, next out the gate, we got traditional finance pivot. So we got about 20 minutes left. So we got 10 minutes for this one, and well, actually, I got like three more. So traditional finance pivot, the $1 trillion stablecoin flippening. So the future is already here. The data proves it. The global fiat-backed stablecoin supply exceeded 273 billion in March 2026, growing 40x since 2020. This leads us to the most disruptive headline of the day. Adjusted stablecoin transaction volumes have hit a staggering 10.9 trillion in the last year. This means that they are officially unrivaling. I'm not sure if that's the right word. Directly challenging Visa's massive 14.2 trillion annual volume. We analyze why major players like Visa, Mastercard, Stripe, and Western Union are integrating stablecoin rails. They're not fighting it. So this is showing that what basically the summary of that is that stablecoin volumes are exceeding credit cards, which is massive because, as you know, everybody uses cards. So if stable with the small amount of adoption that crypto has, overall, and stable coins, the fact that the stablecoin volume is already rivaling the credit card volumes, that is huge. That shows how quickly that this is going to go parabolic, that the use of stable coins is going to go parabolic as these card companies onboard these rails and these stable coins. and integrate into DeFi and Web3 and this different aspects of this technology. So, what are your thoughts on this, David?
Yeah, so I think that these payment processors are going to become, just the rails for stablecoin transactions at some point, because otherwise they can't survive. We're migrating the entire traditional financial system onto digital rails, and that means stablecoins are going to be used whether you realize it or not for everyday payments. So if you're transacting at some point in the future, when you're transacting using your traditional bank account, it's going to be this mullet banking where you've got Web 2 in the front, Web 3 in the back. So it's going to have that regular Web 2 interface that everyone's all used to in the front that you interact with. But the actual transactions themselves are going to take place on digital rails. So that's the Web 3. Now, whether that means on a public blockchain like Ethereum and Solana and Sui and Tron, or that means on something like Canton, that remains to be seen. And so, all of the research that we put together on Canton Network over the last couple of months here, Mike,
Yep.
makes me think that many of these large financial institutions, it seems like they really don't have an incentive to operate on public chains as much as they have an incentive to build their own private walled gardens. And it seems like Canton has an effective monopoly on that transaction volume. So when I see Visa becoming a super validator for the Canton network, that really makes me think that, look, either,
Mastercard.
and MasterCard too, look, they either adopt this technology and reimagine their businesses as digital rails businesses for
Yep.
transacting in stablecoins, or they
Or
die.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it really is adopt this technology or die. And I think that we're in, kind of like, what this talked about, kind of an arms race. What was the terminology that they used? I think I saw it earlier on, but it's basically a financial arms race. Who can adopt, the best project, or technology that's going to allow them to, outperform their competition. And it seems like, I mean, it can change at any time, but right now, everything that I'm watching, I mean, in the depths of this bear market, and again, I'm not trying to influence you to run out and buy Canton, but it's important to understand the facts. And I'm not, because there's always potentially a disconnect between a project and its technology and the products and services that it offers to its clients and the price of the token. We always talk about that, the tokenomics, the mechanics. Do your own research on that. I'm talking specifically about the technology and that digital assets. They built Canton Network, and they're the ones that sell this product to these banks and institutions. That's what I'm talking about right now, not the token. So that being said, it is being adopted at an insane rate on a daily basis. You are seeing the DTCC, Mastercard, Visa, the New York Stock Exchange, J.P. Morgan Chase, just banks and major, the world's largest banks and institutions and organizations are onboarding to this thing, becoming validators, super validators, building out their infrastructure on it. It's insane. Again, doesn't necessarily mean the token is going to go to $1,000 a coin or anything weird like that. Who knows? But the technology, it's important to understand that in the depths of this bear market, it really has been kind of an island. While everything else dumps, the token, for the most part, has been relatively stable. And the token is inflationary right now. And again, I'm going to point out the negatives. Right now, the token is inflationary. There is millions and millions of tokens daily that are, not necessarily dumped on the market, but that are minted. And I won't get into the exact tokenomics because I mean there's a bunch of different aspects where some of it's staked and different things, but there's the burn mechanism. And as the networking usage increases, the burn rate increases to a point where potentially we can reach equilibrium and it becomes deflationary, where potentially the price of the token can go up. Does not mean it will. Again, my second largest holding, but I'm realistic. So I just wanted to, put that
So,
out
so
there.
one last thing about CC, Canton coin,
Yeah.
the pattern, and just keep in mind we have very little data. We don't have years and years of data. But when I take a look at the CC token, what I see is a beautiful, damn near textbook cup with handle pattern. So, a breakout
Here,
on the
if you
cup
ever
with
throw it
handle
up, go ahead.
pattern. Sure, sure. Let me see if I can just bring it up on TradingView just real quick,
Yeah,
and we can
we still got
just
15
take.
minutes. I only got like one or two more topics.
Yeah, let's just take a look at this real quick because that token doesn't look half bad to me. So I'm just taking a look here at BTC. We had a little bit of a breakdown in progress, rejection at resistance, breaking down below support, breaking down below this moving average support also. But let's take a look at CC USDT. The first thing I want to do here is just zoom out to a weekly, and from the weekly we can see that this pattern, in my opinion anyway, and sometimes this technical analysis is in the eye of the beholder, but what I do see here on the weekly is, and let me just go ahead and remove these drawn objects so I can grab the brush. So technically speaking, the left hand side of the cup and the right hand side of the cup are supposed
Are
to be at
equal.
the same level. Yeah, so this is like not perfect. It's not a perfect science here. There is a little bit of voodoo sometimes when it comes to TA. But this, I see a cup, and then here's that handle. And so the target for that pattern is up here, talking about something like 30 cents.
At
So,
$10,000.
no, it's not 10,000.
Yep, you heard it here. Counting to $10,000 a token.
No, and you know what? I mean, even this might not be the handle. You could say this is the handle, and we didn't get the real breakout. So it just kind of depends on how you draw it. Now, if I zoom in to a daily, that cup with handle pattern becomes much less visible. So you
Well,
could
unless
say,
it's that earlier on. There's that cup and then that small handle, and it did pump a little bit up to 19 cents, 18, 19 cents, and then retrace.
right. So this move did not break out above the
No.
all-time highs here on MEXC. So
Well, and
it
part
could.
part of that could be the inflationary aspect. Like I said, the mint is outpacing the burn, so that could have deadened that pump.
It definitely could have, no doubt about it. And the thing about Canton, though, is that they effectively have a monopoly right now on all of the institutional trading volume, all that repo volume. So, and it doesn't seem like that's likely to slow down at any point. It seems like it's going to continue to accelerate, and that there will
Yep.
be even more transaction volume on this private walled garden chain over time. And with all of these new regulations that are being proposed and enacted, it just, I have a difficult time seeing how this doesn't end up becoming some type of vampire attack on public chains like Ethereum. Because if the incentive for institutions is to keep transactions on their own private walled garden chains like Canton, why would they ever move transaction volume onto a public chain like Ethereum or Solana? Maybe those chains are used for retail.
I would say there needs to be interoperability for DeFi, institutional DeFi, things like that. Like say that this the institution in this walled garden. Say some of them are like BlackRock or Fidelity, and they're curating vaults. Or not beefy. Steakhouse, that curates vaults and stuff like that. If they want to move liquidity, then there needs to be interoperability. So I can see some of these working hand in hand, but I see what you're saying with these, with Canton. It really looks like it's becoming, as of right now, the go-to project or chain for these, major banks, institutions, governments, things like that.
Yeah, that's the way it looks to me. And when we were reading earlier today, Mike, about OFAC and FinCEN essentially saying that they want to be able to track all regulated stablecoin transactions, regardless of where they take place. To me, that, I mean, look, Bitcoin fixes this. Bitcoin fixes this problem. So yeah, I remain a Bitcoin bull long term. However, if we take a look at the performance of Bitcoin post Bitcoin conferences, it hasn't exactly been all that good. So and I don't know. I would love for someone to fact check me here, but in 2021, these are the data that I've got so far. In 2021, after the Bitcoin conference, Bitcoin was down 23% in 41 days. In 2022, and that was the bear market year. In 2022, Bitcoin was down 44% in the 35 days following the Bitcoin conference. In 2023, that was the very end of the Bitcoin bear, start of the Bitcoin bull. Bitcoin after the Bitcoin conference in 2023 was down 8% in 28 days. And in 2024, we're rocking and rolling in the Bitcoin bull. And after the Bitcoin conference in 2024, BTC was down 25% in the 11 days following the conference. And then last year, in 2025, after the Bitcoin conference, Bitcoin was down 8% in the 10 days following the Bitcoin conference.
Let me interrupt you real quick, because it's almost like, as usual, it's almost like you know what it is I'm going to talk about, and you're using up all the good speak on this topic. So let me preface what David just said with the showdown in Vegas, Bitcoin 2026 highlights. So Paul Atkins is the first sitting SEC chair to speak at the Bitcoin conference, and the FBI director Kash Patel, who's speaking on ending the war on Bitcoin. And is this a moment of capitulation or a strategic partnership where the U.S. uses Bitcoin to secure its own digital future? David, go.
Okay, so Kash Patel, keep Bitcoin out of your mouth. Like,
Right?
why exactly what does the FBI have to do with the Bitcoin chain exactly? I forgot. And the SEC, like, Bitcoin doesn't need the SEC or the CFTC or a Genius Act or a Clarity Act to thrive. Bitcoin doesn't need any of those things to thrive. All Bitcoin needs is more adoption, more people using it, either using Lightning or using the layer one. He's saying he's there for the drinks. Oh man,
Hey,
so
I'd be there for the free drinks.
yeah, I think it just comes down to people don't understand this stuff well enough. Like,
Yeah.
the US government can't censor a private key, okay? And they can censor your USDC or USDT, as we've seen. Also, if you're holding Ethereum on a layer two, as we saw recently with the DeFi United Fund, where the Arbitrum DAO seized 30,000 ETH on their layer two. If you hold ETH on a layer two, potentially that could be frozen or seized too. So,
David, this is like, if we have time, let's do a little bit of a deep dive on this, because I know that that's something that Kash Patel was talking about and hinting at, was the U.S. government running a node for Bitcoin.
yeah, I'm curious what the incentive is for the US government to run nodes. Because what I know of.
What he mentioned was national security. So that's kind of why I want to do a deep dive on it. Is I'm kind of curious, like you said, why would the government be interested in that? And does that play into the narrative of adding to that Bitcoin strategic reserve? That the U.S. government, that Trump was talking about.
I don't see how. So number one, that's coming from the guy who said that Epstein didn't kill himself, right? Or that he wasn't murdered or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's coming.
That was suicide.
Yeah, coming from the guy who, like, how much of what he says can you actually believe?
I get that, but we got to report the news.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying.
I don't want to tell people what to think. I want to give them the information, and they decide what they want to think.
Yeah, so if I hear a high-ranking U.S. government official talking about running Bitcoin nodes for national security reasons, it makes me think, what are you really doing that for?
It makes my dick itch.
Oh,
That's like my gauge. That's my compass when I smell bullshit. That makes my dick itch.
it makes me think that there's some nefarious purpose. That's what it makes me think.
Exactly. You're about to hook up, and and she looks sketchy, and you're like, yeah, you're making my dick itch. I'm out.
Yeah, no, I that is no bueno,
That's
no
right.
bueno.
No, it's yeah.
Yeah, the thing for me, Mike, with the little clips that I've heard from the Bitcoin conference so far is that they've been like, meh, meh, like, kind of super underwhelming. Whether it's, the director of the FBI saying something or other about Bitcoin. I don't exactly understand why he was there. The director of the SEC talking about Bitcoin, like, I don't understand why Bitcoiners are excited for having, regulation and high-ranking U.S. government officials at their conferences. I thought that Bitcoin was something parallel and potentially diametrically opposed to this entire U.S. Treasury system.
It's been crazy watching, and I haven't been in crypto for a super long time, like maybe 5 years or so. And it's been crazy to watch that shift where all the Bitcoin maxis were like, F the government, F institutions, Bitcoin is the future, the crypto punk ethos, the kind of the not anarchist, but the libertarian, mindset. And then all of a sudden, institutions are talking about ETFs, and everybody was like, "Oh yeah," and everyone, this is bullish. This is gonna pump Bitcoin, and everybody all of a sudden, got to all the same people, not just the narrative shifted, but the same people that were, all of a sudden are cheering on institutions and government adoption. It was just really weird to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see the connection between any type of government involvement in Bitcoin and the success of the protocol. Bitcoin is the only digital commodity, regardless of what the SEC and CFTC say. That list of Sweet 16 digital assets that's got stuff other than Bitcoin on it. I mean, look, those other assets are not digital commodities, irregardless of what some government agency says they are. So it just makes me think that it's so strange that Bitcoiners are excited for high ranking US government officials to be up there touting Bitcoin. Unless those government officials are talking about Bitcoin becoming, a world treasury reserve asset in some way, and facilitating that transition. Unless they're talking about that, I don't want to hear it. I don't care what they say. Look, they can't censor a private key. And all of the people who were excited about those Bitcoin ETFs, the funny thing about that is those Bitcoin ETF products that were touted as the thing that was going to make Bitcoin go to the moon and we were going to see $250,000 BTC last bull cycle. I think that those Bitcoin ETF products are the exact reason why we didn't get a parabola on the upside this past bull cycle, because those Bitcoin ETF products, they tapered volatility. Those
Yep.
products are responsible for taking vol from 70% to
Stabilizing the
40%.
price.
Well, I mean, but
Well,
what that
look at traditional markets. When as we get more market cap, it's going to be harder and harder for the market makers to create that volatility, those massive swings for to harvest liquidity, because that's basically what they do. Looking at the heat maps, is they just bounce it back and forth, liquidating people, sucking liquidity out of the market. But as
right,
more the market cap grows, it's going to get harder and harder, or it's going to be less and less, because it's going to take a lot more liquidity to move the market like that.
right,
So we're going to, over time, Bitcoin is going to, is going to stabilize. I mean, it could still go up and to the right. I mean, look at the S&P 500. Look at a lot of these other large market cap assets. But we're not going to see those massive swings that we saw when it was just retail, when it was just me and you, and maybe a couple of market makers.
Yeah, and if you're talking about the S&P, that reminds me of something, Mike. Remember on the base chain on Aerodrome, your favorite DEX, by the way, Aerodrome.
This aerodrome. Tell me more about it, David.
Yeah, so let me tell you more about it. So on Aerodrome, you remember that and Morpho together. There's that, what is it, DEXSPXA or something, like the tokenized S&P 500 product that has some liquidity pools on Aerodrome, and also has some vaults on Morpho. I was just
Oh, you're
thinking,
talking about the tokenized version of the S&P 500?
yeah, so it's the product on base that is the tokenized version of the S&P 500. I want to find out what it's called because there could be an interesting play using Morpho, to trade that S&P 500 product, and I want to see if I can throw together
Like
some
a loop?
research on that. Yes, exactly, a loop. Yep. So, uh, what is the name of what is the token? What is the name of that token? It's like DEX. Let me see if I can find it. I know it's around here
Oh, here.
somewhere. It's on Aerodrome. It's a product on Aerodrome. It also exists on Morpho. And the idea that I've got here for a trade is to supply stables, borrow that S&P 500 product, and then swap it for stables, supply those stables, and repeat the loop to achieve levered short exposure to the S&P 500, with the S&P 500 at all-time highs and these really big tech companies reporting this week, many of them reporting this week anyway, especially in light of what the CFO at Scam Altman's OpenAI, actually closed for profit AI, in light of the CFO coming out and saying, hey, our revenues are not
So
growing quickly enough to support all of
it
our spend.
it looks like it might be the BCSPX, but I didn't know
No,
this. So the S&P tokenized stock is the SPYX. The Ondo S&P 500 ETF is the the SPYON, SPYON. The backed S&P 500 is the BCSPX, and the iShares Core S&P is the IV Von.
no. So I'm looking for the tokenized S&P 500 product on Aerodrome.
Yeah,
That's
let
the
me look
one.
it up.
That's the one. I think it's DESXPSCA or some shit. Like,
I'm
why?
going to,
Why did they have to? Why did they have to make the token so difficult to remember?
right? Just call it
Yeah,
like they call it the SP 500.
right. Why couldn't they just do that? Okay.
Done.
Yeah. So I'm still not finding it.
So the somebody made a comment earlier. While you're looking that up, somebody made a comment earlier about when we were talking about the new infrastructure that all these institutions and stuff are building on, and the emergence of AI. Two massive, DeFi, merge with crypto, and these rails that are being built out. AI bots, AI agents, all of this stuff that's being built out. Some of the stuff that David's built, stuff, offerings that a lot of these institutions are building out. These rails are going to be required for those to be able to operate, for those to be able to make payments, navigate, paywalls. Like what is that? The drawing a blank.
Yeah, the
The
X402.
X402. Yeah, X402 that Coinbase, came out with. Those types of products. This is, I mean, if you're paying attention, it's like this perfect storm, but in the chaos, if you can recognize the patterns, you see what's being built. If you can look through the noise, and look through the smoke and look through the, the battlefield, the fog of war of, this bear market and all, the narratives and, just all the different voices that are out there. If you can focus and you can, be disciplined and you can see, what the banks and institutions are building, You can see, things like X402. You can see, the AI narrative and what AI's part in the finance, the new finance system and DeFi, and the things are being built out. You start to see a picture form, and the picture that I see is why I'm invested in a lot of the stuff I'm invested in. And not saying that I'm going to be right, but all it takes is one or two, is just picking one or two of the the cryptos or AIs, the Googles of crypto and AI. If you can hit one or two of those, the eight that you missed on don't matter. So keep that long-term mindset and keep your head in the race, because a lot of you out there right now that are
So I did not scoop boy. You're right. It is
in the
DESPXA.
depths of a bear market.
Yeah. So
You're
Mike,
the ones that are going to have an advantage over
Mike, Starlink,
oh wait,
Starlink
sorry,
bad.
my internet's acting weird today.
Yeah, it's acting up. But the product, we did find it. It's DESPXA, and there's a vault, DESPXA borrowing USDC over on Morpho. But you see, I don't want to supply DESPXA as collateral. Instead, I want to supply stables as collateral and borrow DESPXA against it. And I'm not sure that I can do that over here on Morpho in this particular vault. Um, what I would prefer to be able to do is, maybe I can just throw up my own, vault on Euler, like a permissionless vault on the base chain on Euler, and that would allow anyone to, supply USDC and then borrow DESPXA or vice versa. That could be interesting because it would essentially allow you to create your own, short S&P 500 position or long S&P 500 position, whatever it might be.
So David, it's claiming that Morpho, possibly Euler Finance, and Multiply. It says that supposedly you can. It says Morpho is the primary lending market for DESPXA. It uses isolated vaults that allow you to deposit or DESPXA to borrow stablecoins. Euler allows for more complex strategies, including shorting DESPXA or leveraging your position.
Okay, so because I'm taking a look at Euler right now, and I'm just looking for a market where I can supply stables and borrow DESPXA. And I see a market, but there's no liquidity in it. So that's not going to work. So maybe if I go to borrow and then I change the debt asset to DESPXA, let's just see if there's
Well, here,
anything
let's
there.
let's share your screen while you're doing this.
I did find it. So it looks like there is a vault, but there's no liquidity in it.
Can you share
Um,
your screen, David?
Sure. Here, let's take a look at this. So this is Euler. This is Euler.finance. This is a permissionless money market. This is, what DeFi is supposed to be, permissionless. Stuff like Thorchain, permissionless, Bitcoin, permissionless. Euler, anyone can build on this. It's permissionless. This is what I really, really enjoy, these permissionless markets. But if we take a look here, so this is the market that I was looking for, where I can supply USDC and borrow DESPXA. So this is this is the trade that I want to run. The problem here is that as we scroll down, it looks like there is a problem with their Oracle. So there's no price feed, but worse than that, there's no liquidity here. So like total supplied, zero, total borrowed, zero, no liquidity. No, so there's USDC liquidity here, but there's no DESPXA to borrow. So Yeah, this is, and it's at 0%. So this is not something that you could actually use. Um, yeah, this is
It's still relatively new. I mean that DESPXA, that tokenized S&P 500 is still relatively new, so it might just take a bit.
right. And so over here on Morpho, there is the DESPXA market. It's got $1.93 million in size, but very, very little liquidity, it looks like. If the size is 1.93 and liquidity is 1.91, where is all of that liquidity? So if we scroll down here and just take a look at this, those are vaults that list it, Oracle attributes, okay. And what I'm looking for here is utilization. So utilization is actually quite high. It's above the kink right now. And yeah, collateral at risk, very
Yeah,
little.
you got to mind the kink.
Yeah, man. So it looks like that strategy that I wanted to run is not something that you could actually run. Unfortunately, if you wanted to get leverage short the S&P, you'd probably have to do that on, if you wanted to be on base, you'd probably have to do that on like Avantis. I'm not the biggest fan of trading perps on Avantis, or you'd have to hop on over to Hyperliquid where you could trade S&P 500 perps. But yeah, I would prefer to be able to do this on a money market because it would mean that I'd be able to borrow. My cost of carry would be much, much lower on a
Scott,
money
Scotty,
market.
Scotty says check Solana on StockX.
Right. So that would be something more like Camino. Camino.finance, one of those. I think Camino is the largest money market on Solana. And so if we're over here on Camino, and look, this is not exactly my favorite money market. But if we just hop on over here, this is all vaults, stables. So I just want to scroll down through, and instead of looking at vaults, let me hop into borrow. We've got these different assets. I'm looking not in the main market. I probably need to look in the stock X market if it still exists. That's Maple, JLP, Solstice, X stocks. So there's X stocks. So in the X stocks market, you could supply, it looks like you could supply USDC and earn 3.25% and then borrow SPYX against it, paying 3.94%. It looks like you might be able to do that. I don't know if you can actually supply stables and borrow these though. I'm not quite sure if you can use the stable as collateral here. You probably can, but let me just see borrow overview. Sometimes, even if you supply stables, it's not going to allow you to borrow the asset that you want to borrow against it. So you would have to really just hop on into this market with some cash and find out. So yeah, just taking a look at this X stocks market on Camino makes me think that you might be able to run that play over here on Camino, where you could get short the S&P into this week of big earnings, a lot of earnings announcements this week. But that looks like another way to get levered short, any of these items. Hey, getting leverage short Nvidia at all-time highs might not be a bad idea, especially since these assets have basically gone straight up over the last couple of weeks.
Oh,
Makes
hell
me
yeah.
want to take the opposite side.
Freaking daily candles have been insane.
I know they really have. So I think Mike, the research that I want to run through today with
Yeah,
everyone, I've got a couple of pieces
we got
of
about
research.
45 minutes, so time is yours, brother.
Awesome. So here I've got the first thing that I want to run through is right here. And so this is all about expected value. And so, this is for anyone who's serious about becoming a trader, this is how you need to think. You need to think in terms of expected value. And you also need to really consider how much you're willing to risk in order to find out whether you're right in a trade. So I want to run through this expected value content here. So why don't we start things off instead of running through the slide deck? It'll probably be easier if first we take a look at the video content and then we can run through that slide deck. I think that this will be really valuable for everyone because expected value is the way that we need to start to think if we're going to be successful traders.
I miss that other style, that like the non-cartoony, like the one that you did. Remember where the hand flipped us off?
Yes, yes. So that's going to be the next one.
All
Yeah,
right.
the next one that I put together is on Pendle, because a crypto bond market, Pendle, it's not one of a kind anymore. There's basically a copycat on Solana, but Pendle is the king of tokenized digital bonds. So why don't we take a look here through this expected value guide? This will be interesting.
Welcome back, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through this explainer today.
Oh my God. Can you hear this, Mike? When I was playing this,
I gave you the thumbs up.
You were able to hear it? Okay, gotcha.
If you've ever traded digital assets, you already know the market takes absolutely no prisoners. So today, we're looking at the ultimate survival guide to mastering the unforgiving mathematics of leveraged cryptocurrency trading. We're going to strip away the emotion, the hype, the flashy charts, and we're looking purely at the uncompromising quantitative math that actually dictates who survives and who gets totally wiped out.
Let's start right out of the gate with a massive paradox. Why is it that so many crypto traders completely fail and just blow up their accounts, even when they correctly predict where the price is going to go? It's a wildly frustrating reality. Predicting price action simply isn't enough to stop traders from bleeding money in crypto markets. The secret to survival isn't a better crystal ball, you guys. It's a better mathematical...
You gotta pause it. These comments in the chat are cracking me up. Scotty says this guy's voice equals nope, and then Jay said gay aerobics trainer voice.
Oh my God, I know. Look, I don't have any control over the narrator in these videos, but this narrator is the most ridiculous one I've ever heard in any of these videos, and I've played a lot of them. Yeah. But this guy's got something else going on, man.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for how we're going to systematically transition from a naive retail mindset to cold, hard, institutional mathematics. First, the quantitative trader's mindset. 2, the Babe Ruth effect. 3, the leverage illusion. 4, hidden crypto friction costs. And finally, surviving with the Kelly criterion.
Let's kick things off with part 1, the quantitative trader's mindset. Because the line between gambling and professional trading really comes down to one uncompromising metric: expected value. Think about the retail gambler. This mindset is entirely focused on the psychological comfort of directional forecasting, basically trying to guess if the price will go up or down, and they're usually aiming for a really high win rate. On the flip side, we have the professional quant. Quants don't view the market as a series of individual events to be predicted. Instead, they view it purely as a continuous probability distribution. Their entire goal is the systematic extraction of positive expectancy over thousands of trades. It's not about being right, it's about the math.
That gambler image reminds me of A Clockwork Orange, when they had his eyes like pried open, making him watch all the violent movies.
Yeah, so I mean, here's the thing though. If you're trading without calculating expected value, then what you're doing is gambling. And no one has a crystal ball. No one knows what markets are going to do today, tomorrow, at any point ever. So what you have to do instead is assign a probability to a specific outcome, and you have to determine what is your edge. So if you're really, really good at identifying patterns that repeat on charts, then maybe you assign a specific probability to a pattern breaking in one direction or the other. But even that isn't enough.
If you don't mind, I mean, I might be able to just kind of simplify, kind of your point, and let me know if I'm wrong. But what I'm hearing is pretty much if you're not doing any of this stuff, you're gambling. If any additional thing you can do, chart analysis, if you're good at recognizing patterns like David's talking about, or you're good at doing deep research, on these projects and their founders and their tokenomics and things like that. Any one thing or combination of things that's going to give you an advantage over other people to position yourself better, you're going to have a better chance, not a guarantee, but a better chance to be profitable.
You need some type of an edge. And the quant is going to calculate the expected value of that edge. And then that quant is going to run that same trade over and over and over again. And as long as the assumptions are correct, then you should end up consistently making money over time.
Being profitable over time. Moving right along to section 2, the Babe Ruth effect. Get ready because we're about to completely shatter the myth that a high win rate equals guaranteed profit through asymmetric risk to reward.
The Babe Ruth effect is a really fascinating mathematical dynamic. Think about the legendary baseball player Babe Ruth. He struck out incredibly frequently, meaning, he had a terribly low win rate. But when he did hit the ball, his slugging percentage was massive. He hit absolute home runs. Well, in quantitative finance, elite traders actually embrace a low win rate to capture the positive skew of outsized home run trades. They fully expect and tolerate frequent small realized losses because they know the math of their huge payoffs will cover those losses and generate excess returns.
Okay, so you got to think about this. How much are you willing to risk to find out if you're right when you're trading?
To really visualize this brutal reality, let's look at 2 hypothetical trading systems. System A feels amazing psychologically. It boasts a 70% win rate. You're winning 7 out of 10 times. But the underlying math guarantees an average loss of $10 per trade. Over 1,000 trades, you were statistically guaranteed to bleed capital. Now look at System B. It only wins
That's a sad pig.
That's a sad pig.
35% of the time. You are losing nearly twice as often as you win. But because of the payoff asymmetry, it yields an expected profit of $100 over those same 1,000 trades.
Okay, so here's the thing. System B is going to be much more difficult for a retail trader to adopt because it's hard on your mindset. If you only are correct 35% of the time, but you make money consistently, that means that you have to expect to lose often. But when you're right, that takes care of your US dollar profit over time.
Your wins outpace your losses.
Yeah, but you could go with system A and you would have a really high win rate, which would probably feel good psychologically. But the goal of this game is not to feel good psychologically. The goal is to make money.
I'll feel good psychologically when my account is full of money.
Right. Well, you need to endure a lot of pain to be able to get there.
System B is mathematically robust. System A is literally just an illusion.
I think there's a lesson in what you just said. Pain for gain. That's true in a lot of aspects of life. Some of the most rewarding and things that make you better version of yourself, physically, mentally, financially, all come at a cost of discomfort and pain. So that's it.
Yeah, and you've got to also construct your system such that it's got a statistical probability of making you money over the course of not just a couple of trades, but hundreds of trades. We're talking about something that can make you money consistently over time.
Well,
So
and something that on this topic is the DeFi University, the mindset courses. But if you're new to investing or if you've been in investing, go through those mindset courses because this addresses all these things that we're talking about. Rewiring your brain to not be seeking out those endorphin hits for the wins, calling the right trades and stuff like that, but looking at the end result. It might be painful, but again, what David's talking about here is being profitable, not feeling good, not getting a high win rate, but watching your portfolio grow. So
that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Which brings us to section 3, the leverage illusion. This is where we have to talk about the mechanics of leverage, because adding it to a working system can instantly turn it into a mathematical loser. Let's look at the frictionless, naive, expected value formula. It's simply the probability of winning times the average win minus the probability of losing times the average loss.
And hey, while it works beautifully in theory or in standard spot markets, relying on this basic math fails catastrophically when transposed to the nonlinear amplifier of crypto leverage.
Right.
So why does it fail? Because leverage doesn't just multiply your gains, it radically alters the operational dynamics of your portfolio. First, excessive leverage amplifies variance drag. Mathematically, your actual portfolio growth, your geometric compounding, is always dragged down below your simple arithmetic returns as variance increases. Second, it exponentially spikes your risk of ruin. It essentially models liquidation as a first passage time problem. Basically, hitting absolute zero before your statistical edge can even play out becomes almost certain if your leverage is too high.
Oh, wow. So basically, if you use too much leverage, you are statistically very likely to go to zero.
All right, Section 4, Hidden Crypto Friction Costs. It is time to unveil the real villains of the crypto derivatives market that secretly drain a trader's margin. Variance isn't the only thing destroying leveraged accounts. We have to talk about deterministic friction. These are your maker and taker fees, continuous perpetual funding rates, and market impact, or slippage, which institutions model using highly complex frameworks like the Talos model. And this brilliantly illustrates the trap. All of these hidden costs are calculated on your notional volume. That means if you use 50x leverage, your fees are multiplied by 50, even though your actual base account balance hasn't changed at all. It punishes leverage positions severely. Let's actually break down the real numbers here using a standard non-VIP fee tier. If you take a 50x leverage scalp trade using market orders on Bybit, the total round-trip fee is calculated on that massive, multiplied notional value. When you compare that fee back to your actual initial margin, your base equity, that single trade consumes exactly 2.75% of your equity just to execute. You are mathematically guaranteed a massive loss before the price even ticks up or down.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the true reality, the complex net EV formula. You can see the friction symbols are added directly into the equation. It shows us that perpetual funding rates, which can easily be a 10.95% annualized drain on a 10x long position, and execution slippage are strictly additive to your gross losses. If you have a losing trade, the fees make the loss even deeper, fundamentally skewing your entire probability distribution into negative territory.
So, how do we make it out alive? Section 5, Surviving with Kelly Criterion. Because if expected value dictates what to trade, position sizing dictates exactly how much capital to risk.
Enter the Kelly criterion. This formula right here is your absolute weapon for survival. It's designed to calculate the precise percentage of your portfolio you should risk on a single trade to maximize long-term geometric growth while avoiding ruin. By taking into account the win probabilities and the payoff odds, the math dictates an optimal allocation. In the specific outcome calculated here, it's exactly a 33.3% allocation. It's not a random guess, it is a precise mathematical directive.
Let's move to and see how this builds across different scenarios. This table is a shocking reality check. Look at the bottom row. Even if you have a 45% win rate, if your payoff odds are only 1.00, meaning you risk $1 to make $1, the Kelly fraction evaluates to exactly 0.000. Do you know what that actually means? The math literally orders you not to take the trade. Any capital deployed in that specific scenario is mathematically doomed to be lost over time.
Finally, we have to look at how we exit our trades. Contrast an algorithmic stop loss against the exchange liquidation engine. A planned stop loss is a controlled exit based entirely on your risk parameters. But if you rely on the exchange's liquidation price, you face a severe asymmetric risk. When the exchange steps in to close your position at their maintenance margin, they don't just close it, they trigger a massive clearance penalty fee that gets injected straight into their own insurance fund.
So the crucial point is this: 100%. If your excessive use of leverage pushes your liquidation barrier so close to your entry price that it sits within the normal, everyday intraday volatility bands of that crypto asset, your mathematical probability of ruin approaches an absolute, guaranteed 100%. The market's natural noise will simply wipe you out before your predictive edge ever has a chance to play out.
Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. So expected move, okay? So if we know the volatility of a digital asset, we can calculate its expected move over a particular period of time, be it a day, a week, a month, or a year. So if we know, let's use ETH as an example. If we know ETH's volatility and we calculate its expected move on a daily basis to be, let's say, plus or minus 3%, and you're using 30x leverage. What that means is that expected move of plus or minus 3% each day, you're going to get really, really close to getting liquidated just because of the random noise in the asset moving up or down by plus or minus 3% each day. If you're levered long and you're levered long by 30x and ETH pulls back by 3%, that's what you should statistically expect it to do on a daily basis. Then you get liquidated. You don't have enough time for your edge to play out because you're using too much leverage. So what would be a more acceptable amount of leverage to use? Well, it might be a better idea just to start with no leverage. But if that's not acceptable to you, then try using something like 3x or 5x leverage or 10x at maximum. But again, that is still a ton of leverage. So try using less leverage.
We've covered a ton of intense ground today, from variance drag and notional fees to the Kelly criterion. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Does your current trading system actually survive this uncompromising math? When you factor in all the hidden costs, the funding rates, and the true net EV, do you actually have a statistical edge? I hope this explainer has inspired you to recalculate your entire risk management framework. See you next time.
Okay, so there's something interesting that we can do with this, Mike, because I've got this leveraged, crypto EV master guide over here.
We need to, can we change the voice next time to like a hot lady?
Oh man, no kidding, dude. Yeah.
Like a hot Australian or something like that.
Yeah, for real. But what we could do with that piece of research is I could turn that into a single page web application that would allow us to calculate expected value for any particular trade.
That's something we need to add to the list is on the website. We need to add something to the menu or something and add some of the tools that you built out.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of stuff that needs to get done too.
Oh yeah. Just one of the many things, but some of those tools are just so cool that you built out.
So here's the bottom line. Without calculating expected value, math just kind of guarantees that you're going to systemically lose over time, especially when using leverage. So here's that expected value formula. So the challenge with this is calculating a probability for your win rate and a probability for your loss rate over time. So that could be difficult because if you're just getting started, then you're kind of guessing at what your probability of a win is. Remember, this is your edge.
So you don't have the historical data, or
well, because you don't necessarily know what is my edge. What is your probability that you're going to win? What is the probability that you're going to be right? If you don't know that yet, then it's going to be kind of difficult to calculate EV. So here's that leverage illusion: margin versus notional. Okay, so leverage proportionally amplifies the absolute amount won and amount lost, but it does not alter the gross expected value percentage relative to the notional value. So here's the trap. This leverage critically alters your net expected value relative to your initial margin. And so all deterministic exchange friction costs are calculated on the massive this massive amount of leverage, not the tiny amount of leverage. So leverage does alter your net EV calculation. And I can build this into a web app to make it easier. So volatility drag, this is also referred to as variance drag. So think about it this way. If you've got a digital asset, let's say we're talking about something like, let's use ETH again as an example. Or you know what, let's just use a digital asset XYZ, doesn't matter what it is. Let's say that it's got a dollar value of $100. And on day one, it's down by 10%. Okay, now it's trading for $90. On day two, it's up by 10%. Okay, great. Now it's trading for $99. It's still down $1 from where it was 2 days ago. So this high level of volatility results in something called variance drag. So just keep that in mind, that high volatility digital assets can sometimes decay away as a result of this. So here's a little bit about crypto friction. You've got all of these fees that you've really got to keep an eye on. And those fees get amplified the more leverage that you use. So you've got maker and taker fees, you've got these funding rates, which you've really got to manage. You've got, slippage, that's market impact. And all of these things together, you just multiply that by your leverage. And all of a sudden, that is going to give you your true net expected value. So leverage multiplies all of these fees. Okay, friction one, maker and taker fees. Yeah, really got to keep this in mind because leverage can multiply these. Friction two, in perpetual futures trading, you've got to consider the funding rate. This is your continuous cost of carry, but sometimes you actually earn that carry. So if funding is positive and you're short, you're earning funding. If funding is negative and you're long, then you're earning funding. So friction three is market impact. This is your slippage. So when you go and you enter a trade, I don't think that any of us are going to be trading in large enough size to really move markets, because most of these markets that we're going to be trading on are going to be very liquid for trades of a size between a couple $100s and a couple $100,000. So it's really not until you get into like the $1 million trade level that you really start to move markets against yourself. So just keep that in mind, that we really don't have to worry too much about market impact for most of the trades that we're going to be running as retail investors. But this is the bottom line here. We need to be able to calculate our true net expected value. So here's this crucial insight. In a losing trade, execution friction costs are strictly additive to the gross loss. So friction deepens the net loss, severely skewing the distribution's negative tail.
Really quick, I know for a lot of people that might watch this, looking at these formulas is very intimidating. But try not to focus on the formulas, because I'll be honest, I have no idea what those are. Focus on what they represent. So like basically what David's going over. Focus on the numbers behind the formula. The different aspects, because that's all those symbols are, is these individual things that David's talking about. So try to ignore the formulas, because unless you're somebody that is just very, very knowledgeable on this stuff, it's going to basically be Greek to you. So sorry, just wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're totally right. And so the way that I'm thinking about this is just, I want to be able to present it to everyone. And then I can take that initial research document and turn that into a web application that we can all use without having to know all of the complex math behind the scenes. So just something to keep in mind there. So let's see here. Now that we're basically done with this slide deck, I want to hop on into the next piece of content that hopefully is not going to be as intimidating for most investors in digital assets here. This is all on Pendle. So Pendle, if we just take a look at Pendle real quick, Pendle is it's essentially a bond market. It's essentially a crypto bond market, because these principal tokens, or PTs as they're referred to, allow you to earn something referred to as fixed state, fixed rate yield. So what that means is you earn fixed yield, fixed rate yield, which is pretty darn cool. Now you can earn fixed rate yield on all sorts of different assets here. But one thing that you've got to keep in mind is that these assets are not created equal. Okay, so something like, staked or SUSDE, Athena's product, paying 5.35% fixed right now. This SUSDE product is, part of Athena's dual tranche system. And yes, it's pegged to one, rebasing, where the yield compounds into the token price. But this is just a yield-bearing token, almost like a representation of Athena's strategy that they arbitrarily pegged to one and made rebasing. This is not a stablecoin in the same way that a USDC or a USDT are stable coins. So there's a lot of hidden risk with these crypto bonds. USDAI is a great example of hidden risk. You really need to be able to do deep dive research on all of these protocols to understand, does this 15% yield fixed for APYX, does that make sense? Is this enough yield to earn? Are you being compensated enough, earning 15% to take on the risk of being exposed to this APYX token or protocol? And if the answer is no, then hey, 15% might look great, but really maybe you should be getting paid 45%. So you've just got to be thinking about that. Am I being compensated enough for taking the risk of being exposed to this token? That's really the core here. Number one, you got to be able to understand how the Pendle protocol functions. But once you understand how it works, then it's really just a matter of figuring out which tokens you're going to be compensated enough for taking on that risk of being exposed to them. So here's a little bit about Pendle as we're waiting for that slide or that video content to complete. So Pendle is a pretty cool protocol. So this interest rate market is a massive, massive market in TradFi. In DeFi, crypto yields are usually unpredictable. And so Pendle has basically, not quite a monopoly yet, but they've captured a significant majority of the DeFi yield trading market. So the interest rate swap market in TradFi is massive, and in DeFi, it's up and coming. Pendle and Boros are the two protocols leading the charge. So you've got all of these different fragmented yields, right? You've got, rebasing tokens like Lido's staked ETH. You've got interest-bearing collateral. You've got LPs. You've got reward mining. And so what Pendle did here is they created a new primitive called the SY wrapper, or ERC 5115. And the way this works is the SY wrapper takes a yield-bearing asset like a rebasing token, like staked ETH, and strips it of its.
So that's the YT and PT.
Yes. So the SY wrapper creates the YT and the PT. The YT represents the yield of that underlying yield-bearing asset until maturity. The PT is the principal stripped of its yield. So essentially, the PT is a zero coupon bond. And when you swap into a PT, you earn fixed yield until maturity. So when the PT matures, then you can either redeem that PT for the underlying asset at par plus your yield in that underlying with no slippage, or you can roll that PT to a different product entirely or just to a different maturity cycle. So this standardization allows Pendle to permissionlessly integrate any yield generating mechanism, creating an interoperable perpetual interface. So you got your SY token, the Pendle protocol disaggregator here, and it creates the PT and the YT. So SY equals PT plus YT. So the principal token is the PT. This is essentially a zero coupon bond, and it forfeits the variable yield in exchange for fixed yield. But you purchase it at a discount. That's part of the reason why it's a zero coupon bond. So it's mathematically guaranteed to redeem at par or 1-for-1 for the underlying accounting asset at maturity. So this delivers a fixed rate of return. It delivers fixed yield. And then you got the YT, the yield token. This is the sole entitlement to the variable yield stream and, importantly, reward points. Many protocols during the bull were offering a ton of reward points, and so you could speculate on the value of those points by trading the YTs. So YTs are highly speculative and they are highly leveraged. So this is a time decaying asset, and it decays to zero at maturity. So if you buy a YT equal to one ETH, okay, that YT is going to, it's the yield produced by one ETH. That YT is going to decay to zero over time. So you had better make sure that whatever points you expect to earn are going to be worth more than whatever you paid for that YT. Okay, the mathematical crisis of standard
So the
AMMs,
yield needs to outpace the decay.
or whatever you're trying to trade that YT for. If you're trading a YT because you think that the points are going to be worth more than what you paid for the YT in the first place, okay, that's a strategy. But just keep in mind that they do decay to zero at maturity. So these standard AMMs, Pendle had to create a custom AMM in order to use the SY wrapper. So the time-aware AMM, this is Pendle's custom automated market maker. So they tout zero impermanent loss. Impermanent loss in this custom AMM is capped at exactly zero at maturity. That's important. Your IL is zero at maturity. You've got single-sided liquidity here. The flash swaps translate the yield token orders into PTYT or PTSY trades. So it doubles LP fees. You can also provide liquidity on Pendle. And there's a lot of capital efficiency here. It says up to a 200x improvement over version 1 by tightly concentrating liquidity. Okay,
so Scotty has a question I think that a lot of people probably have. So he says, no matter what, you lose the value equal to one ETH, and he's it's a question. So I think that maybe we need to give a little more insight into that aspect, that decay
Sure.
that you were talking about.
Let's take a look at this then. So let's hop into the Athena market. And you see here, we've got this YT and you've got this leverage amount. You see that there? And
Yeah.
YT and leverage. So here's the thing. If I were to, let's just click on this YT, which is going to go to zero in 8 days. There's the maturity right there. This SUSDE product, this PT or this market matures on the 6th of May. So 8 days from now. So if I want to trade the YT, what is my market bias? What am I expressing to the market? Well, what I'm saying is if I trade this YT, I think that whatever points I'm going to earn, Athena season a million, whatever season Athena's in, I'm saying that I think those points are going to be worth more than what I paid for the YT, or you're saying, I think yields are going to go up significantly over the next, within the next 8 days in order for me to have at some point the ability to close the trade for a profit. And I'm using a ton of leverage.
So my question would be, is your goal to not hold a YT to maturity?
So my goal would be to only trade YTs if I have a high level of conviction in the direction of the underlying interest rate. So if I have a directional,
I got that, but I mean, is the overall goal that that you're seeing the interest rate go up and you can cash out of it before it reaches maturity and goes to zero?
that's one way of thinking about it.
Okay.
Or you could
I'm just
say,
trying to wrap my head around it.
yeah, so that's it. And look, it took me a while to understand this stuff, but one way of thinking about it is if you look at this underlying APY and you say to yourself, hey, well, I think that this is going to go from 5% to 6% over the next couple of days. Well, I still wouldn't do it because 8 days is just not enough time. But let's say that that's your assumption and you have a high level of conviction in that. You buy the YT. If you think that this 5% is overstated and you think that maybe over the next couple of days it goes from 5% to 4%, then you sell the YT. If you think that the points that you can earn by trading this YT are going to be worth more than the capital outlay to buy the YT in the first place, then you buy the YT. So there are different ways of expressing a market bias on rates or a points program by trading YTs.
Well, and you kind of breezed over, and not in a bad way, but because it's something that that I have learned from you is whenever you're looking for these YTs, you're almost always looking for, like, I think it's like 30 or 60 days or 90 days or something like that. Like the longer, the better, because it gives you more time, to mitigate that decay that you're talking about. Correct?
So I don't trade YTs. I only like to trade the PTs.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so for the PTs,
I just know before in our, in other conversations in the past that you've talked about that you always look for longer time frames.
yes, always, always. So, I don't trade YTs because I don't want to speculate on rates. I will trade PTs, and when I do, I always make sure that I've got plenty of time until maturity, but not necessarily too much time. And so here's why. Yield accrues to your
There is
position.
a sweet spot between too little and too much.
Yeah, there is. There is. And so here's another thing that you have to consider if you're yeah, so check this out, Mike. Here's something else that you've really got to think about if you're taking a look at these PTs, because if you've got 169 days until maturity and you really want to get the most bang for your buck by holding one of these PTs, well, if you've got to hold something for 169 days, and look, you are not locked in. These are liquid. You can swap in and you can swap out. But if you've got to hold exposure to SUSD for 169 days, you had better know everything that there is to know about this USD protocol, because 169 days in crypto is an eternity. So I would be
And
looking.
also, all stable coins aren't created equal.
Right. And so this is not a stable coin. Like this USD thing, like it might be pegged to one and have a rebasing version that, where yield accrues to the token over time, but this is not a stable. It's
We actually talked about this. I know you remember it, but the
yeah.
audience, we actually had an episode where we talked about all stable coins aren't created equal, and USD was one of them. It is
Mhm.
not a stable coin.
Yeah. So look, I mean, any protocol can take a strategy, wrap it, and then mint a token against it, peg that token to one, and call it a stable coin. And I'm just not, I am always thinking to myself, verify, don't trust. And so that means that what I need to do before I get exposure to any of these products is I need to do a deep dive on the underlying protocol. Who runs the protocol? Where do they live? Are they doxed? Do they have a track record of success or not? Those are just some basic things that I'm thinking about here. So let's take a look.
We got about 7 minutes left. Like, what do you want to touch on in the last little bit?
We could take a look at this piece of content. This is the nice looking content here.
Nice.
About Pendle. This could be pretty valuable.
Great.
Traditional global capital markets are built on a bedrock of predictable returns. Fixed income securities and interest rate swaps represent the largest segment by size. But on-chain, capital faces extreme, unpredictable yield volatility.
Okay, so fixed income in DeFi is those Pendle PT tokens, and interest rate swaps in DeFi is the Boros protocol.
This chart compares global market sizes. You can see the traditional fixed income market comprising over $500 trillion in outstanding notional value.
Okay, what comes after trillion? Like, what?
A gazillion.
Is it gazillion? I don't know what it is.
Well, I mean, a gig. I don't know.
I don't know.
This infrastructure allows institutions to manage risk, hedge forward exposure, and apply speculative leverage. Decentralized finance has historically struggled to replicate this pillar. The barrier is twofold. Cryptocurrency yields inherently fluctuate, and standard automated market makers lack the technical capacity to accurately price time-decaying assets. Pendle Finance operates as a specialized venue built specifically to solve this deficiency. It introduces the interest rate infrastructure layer to the digital asset economy. Since its launch in late 2020, Pendle has captured between 50 and 60% of the entire decentralized yield trading market. To understand how they captured that liquidity, we must structurally isolate the yield, unpack their time-aware AMM mathematics, and map out perpetual funding rates. By providing a mechanism to lock in guaranteed rates, Pendle bridges the gap between variable digital assets and the fixed-rate demands of institutional capital. In traditional finance, bond stripping allows investors to physically separate the principal of a debt instrument from its interest. Pendle executes the blockchain equivalent, allowing market participants to separate the core capital of a cryptocurrency asset from its future yield stream. But decentralized yield generation is fragmented. A liquid staking token operates differently than a stablecoin receipt from a lending market or a liquidity position on an exchange. Integrating each mechanism originally required custom smart contracts. To aggregate this scattered liquidity, Pendle introduced the ERC 5115 Standardized Yield, or SY, framework. This acts as a universal adapter that auto-compounds and routes accrued yield from any underlying asset directly into the Pendle ecosystem. This equation demonstrates the core invariant of the protocol. When an asset is deposited and wrapped into SY, the protocol divides it into two distinct derivative tokens. The total value of the standardized yield token must always equal the combined value of the principal token and the yield token. The principal token, or PT, functions as a zero-coupon bond. When you hold a PT, you explicitly forfeit all the variable yield and reward points generated by the underlying asset. Because you give up that income, the PT trades at a natural discount. However, upon reaching its maturity date, the PT becomes fully redeemable at a 1-to-1 ratio for the underlying asset. The predictable appreciation from your discounted purchase price up to that redemption is what establishes a guaranteed fixed annual percentage yield. Conversely, the yield token, or YT, represents the sole entitlement to that variable yield stream until the maturity date. Because YT is a time-decaying asset, its market value trends towards zero, finalizing at zero at the moment of maturity. By stripping away the heavy capital requirement of the principal, speculators can acquire yield tokens for a fraction of the underlying asset spot price. This creates significant implicit leverage, but it is a race against time. Because the asset decays towards zero, the accrued yield delivered to the holder must outpace their initial acquisition cost before the expiration date to realize a net profit. This tokenization pipeline serves two opposite sides of the market. It offers risk-averse funds fixed returns through the principal token, while providing speculators with leveraged yield exposure through the yield token. Trading time-decaying derivatives introduces a flaw in standard market makers. When two pool assets diverge in price, liquidity providers suffer impermanent loss. As we established, the principal token converges to a value of 1, and the yield token decays to 0. This chart illustrates the opposing trajectories of the two tokens. Because of these distinct mechanics, their price ratio is guaranteed to diverge over time. Look at what happens when you map this onto a standard market maker like Uniswap v2. The static x times y equals k pricing curve distributes liquidity uniformly across all price ranges. As the time-decaying assets force the ratio to diverge, the pool is pushed far away from its initial equilibrium. This ensures severe impermanent loss for anyone providing liquidity. Even modern concentrated liquidity models amplify this risk. Because liquidity is tightly bound to a specific range, the decaying assets will eventually exit that range entirely. Without a proprietary pricing engine, providing liquidity for yield derivatives results in significant losses, making a custom-built mathematical solution necessary. To solve this, Pendle engineered a V2 AMM specifically designed to mitigate the impermanent loss paradox. It operates as a time-aware pricing engine. This is the logarithmic pricing curve that governs the spot exchange rate. Notice that the curve is not static. The specific variable highlighted here dynamically adjusts capital efficiency based on the time remaining to expiry. The protocol also utilizes a shifting parameter adjusted prior to any trade. This ensures the pre-trade implied interest rate matches the implied rate of the last executed swap. This architecture actively accounts for the natural price appreciation of the principal. As time passes, the AMM curve automatically shifts, pushing the PT spot price towards its underlying 1-to-1 fundamental value. Because the pricing curve corrects for this divergence, time-dependent impermanent loss is minimized. If a liquidity provider holds their position until maturity, both the PT and the SY tokens hold the same value, effectively capping their impermanent loss at 0. To prevent liquidity fragmentation, the AMM operates as a single pool, containing only principal tokens and standardized yield tokens. So how do speculators trade the yield token without a dedicated pool? When a user places an order to buy YT, the AMM translates that order into a swap between PT and SY, using binary search algorithms to route the trade internally via a flash swap.
Hmm.
This mechanism means users only need to seed the pool with PT and SY tokens. They capture swap fees from all YT trades without taking on direct YT exposure themselves.
Hmm.
For large deposits, Pendle implemented Keep YT mode. This retains the generated yield tokens in the user's wallet, ensuring that deep pool seeding does not distort the market's implied interest rates. By explosively coding time into the liquidity pool's mathematics, Pendle transforms the task of decaying derivatives into a viable yield-bearing strategy. Over long market cycles, on-chain staking rates and liquidity mining emissions naturally compress as the ecosystem matures and rewards are distributed across more capital. To grow beyond these limits, Pendle must expand its addressable market beyond basic Ethereum and stablecoin yields. This expansion arrived with Boros, Pendle's third protocol iteration. Boros taps directly into the $150 billion daily perpetual futures market. Perpetual futures contracts on exchanges like Binance and Hyperliquid use funding rates to keep the perpetual price tethered to the spot asset price. This chart of historical funding rates reveals a key detail. Standard funding formulas incorporate a baseline interest rate, which creates a built-in positive drift. This establishes a structural floor for yields over time. Boros tokenizes these funding rates into yield units. Traders can use margin to long implied annual rates, while market makers can short the funding rate to lock in a fixed stream. This allows Pendle to capture returns from perpetual markets, providing a revenue vertical that moves independently from standard on-chain staking yields. Historically, the protocol utilized a vote-escrowed tokenomics model. Users locked their Pendle tokens for up to 2 years to direct emission flow. This dynamic birthed the Pendle Wars, as aggregators competed to hoard governance power. But the rigid 2-year lockup requirement introduced institutional friction, alienating liquid hedge funds and treasuries that required portfolio agility. To address this, Pendle transitioned to a liquid staking model via the S-Pendle token. This chart demonstrates the new value accrual pipeline, where an algorithmic buyback framework routes up to 80% of protocol revenues back to participants. This framework establishes a price floor and aligns institutional incentives without requiring illiquid capital locks. But this level of integration creates specific systemic vulnerabilities. Because Pendle functions as a wrapper, it inherently absorbs the risk profiles of every protocol it touches. If an underlying asset depegs or suffers a slashing event, those losses pass directly to Pendle's PT and YT derivatives. A failure in Athena's hedging or eigenlayer security would immediately impact Pendle users. Furthermore, the regulatory climate introduces macro headwinds. Strict compliance laws are currently challenging the global pool of yield-bearing digital assets. Specifically, the 2025 Genius Act prohibits certain stablecoin issuers from offering interest. Because Pendle relies on these productive assets, such regulations pose an existential threat.
Right. So do you think that the banksters who write legislation in Congress are going to be all that happy about, a tokenized crypto bond market and tokenized interest rate swaps? I don't know. Probably not. They probably want to keep that market.
Well, I mean, we're a little bit over time now. I mean, is this a good place to cut it off, or should we
I
keep
think
going?
I think we can stop it here.
All right. So yeah, no, let's let me actually do this real quick.
Oh, so not Scoop Boy, it's quadrillion. So after
Yeah.
trillion, it's quadrillion. Wow.
Well, he actually said something that actually taught me a little something. Where's it at?
Damn, Mike, you're
Okay.
leering? You're
Yeah.
leering.
Like billion is buy, trillion is try, quadrillion is quad. So 2, 3, 4. So I don't know why that didn't freaking dawn on me, but yeah, that makes perfect sense. Billion, trillion, quadrillion.
Well,
All right.
I won't forget that.
No, that's a perfect way to remember it. So then what? It'd be like freaking a pentillion would be after quadrillion then?
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
So, all right. So, yeah, if you would, please, if you're on X or another platform, if you could come on over to YouTube and find us at the Node Network, give us a like, give us give us a follow, give us a share if you appreciate this content, and also check us out on the Node.pro. It is our official website, and if you want to look over this type of learning material, you can join at no charge DeFi University and go through our courses on mindset, the psychology of investing, and everything from entry level DeFi, crypto, and traditional finance, all the way to advanced strategies in DeFi, where David teaches looping and other advanced DeFi strategies to earn yield. So, with that, I appreciate you all, and if you would like to join us later today, our next show up is at 1 p.m. So here in about 2 hours, David will be doing the market wrap up with technical analysis. If you want him to chart your favorite project, make sure to be there, jump in the chat, and ask him to take a look at it. And the second half of that show, he will be doing a live coaching session. He does it every Tuesday and Thursday with Ellie, a member of our community. And after that, at 5 p.m., you have Crypto and Chill with myself and Jeff, where we're just going to have a drink. You can smoke it if you got it. And we're just going to talk about what's happened in the markets, over the weekend and the past couple of days, since Friday. We only do that twice a week. And tonight is a special episode with Jay and Ellie. That will be at 6 p.m., right after Crypto and Chill, where there is a new map that launched on Arc Raiders called Riven Tides. And so we're going to be playing that live. So if you want to join us for that. So again, we are the Node Network, truly are a network. We have 7 different shows for your viewing pleasure. And until next time, this is Veteran Crypto out.
Peace.